Hello, welcome to History in Lowell. We are having a very special episode with some very special friends of mine. I'm Maritza Grooms. I'm joined by my personal professor and buddy, Bob Forrant. And we're joined by our friend, Supervisory Park Ranger from the Lowell National Historical Parks, Emily Donovan. And we're actually inside the One City, Many Cultures exhibit at the Mogan Cultural Center. Emily, we had you on the show a few months ago to talk about this exhibit, and now we're here, which I kind of have chills about.
It's built, it's physical. I cried a lot over the last couple months as they built the physical, because you see things on the page and you have conversations about them, but then you walk in and there are those real objects in the case. There's that timeline on the wall, and so it's been a really exciting journey.
This is amazing. Great job to all who were involved.
I was going to say,
sure.
It's very much the team effort. Huge team, big, long team list. The acknowledgement panel has over 300 names on it.
Wow. 300 names.
Over, I don't know the exact number, but over 300 names.
And all Lowellians.
Pretty much, yeah. I think that everybody is or was a Lowellian or has a really strong Lowell connection, and we were kind of pointed to them because of a Lowell person, so it's pretty cool.
So cool. You know, as I was thinking about what we were going to talk about when we got into the exhibit finally, I kept thinking, you know, I always wonder what goes on with exhibits. How do they even come to fruition? Like, who decides when an exhibit needs updating and who gets the input? And I know we talked about this before, but like, can you talk a little bit about what was here before and how this all came about?
So the exhibit that was in this exact space before was an immigration exhibit, very specifically immigration in Lowell, and it was actually produced in the 1980s by the Heritage Preservation Commission. So that was kind of a partner of the park at the time. At the same time, the park did the Mill Girls exhibit, the boarding house. So both were being developed in tandem. The park was doing the boarding house, the commission was doing the immigration exhibit. And that process was kind of community-based, but I think Pauline said it the other night. She said it really was about, hey, who are you, what community do you represent, do you have an object we can put in the museum? That was kind of the extent of the community involvement. Not that they didn't get amazing objects and, you know, tried to span the whole history of Lowell, but it was just about the objects. I think our approach here was, can't just be immigration. We have people who have been here for 12,000 years, so backing up. We knew we needed a new exhibit, but it's not just the park story to tell. That was really critical. So we said, we don't know what we don't know. We're gonna have an exhibit about people. Let's go talk to people. And instead of approaching it from kind of a timeline perspective, or even a, let's go through and see this group of people, that group of people, what are the stories, we just had conversations, right? Both of you were involved with some of those conversations. Bob has been involved for the past 5 years, Maritza we were in the development conversations. And, you know, what were the themes that emerged that were very Lowell? And it was building community, mobility and transition, and then cultural diversity and commonalities. So from there, then there's the whole process of figuring out what are the objects, what are the photographs, what are the ways, what are the interactives, what are the videos, and that's been kind of the joy and the work. So.
The interesting thing is to work on this, which I obviously did, thinking in two different ways. One is like a historian at a university, and the other is a community member living in a neighborhood.
Yep.
In Lowell, and so for me it was sort of like a back and forth in my brain to really think about the process that you and other people, Emily, in the park were responsible for, which was very different than the way lots of exhibits get done, because one of the things that I teach and think about is how do we do exhibits in museums, and I just wrote a book about where are workers in museums because they don't appear, right? And so along the way, thinking about this, I was always so appreciative and amazed by how much you all, and I'm not blowing smoke, I mean, I believe this deep in my heart, how much you all wanted to get that, almost begged sometimes for people say something. And I feel like that's why when I came in here, you know, a few minutes ago, it was still overwhelming in terms of what's in here and realizing that worked.
It was partially we don't know what we don't know, but also recognizing that even if we do know a story, conceptually, like, okay, yeah, we know the story of how the connector stopped and everything, but have we actually heard from people who lived through that? And is it our story to tell? I mean, we want to steward it in this space, and we want to work with our exhibit developers to make it happen, but really, whose story is it to tell? And so I think that was really important in this process.
So we being the community, the park, everybody has been working on this for a while. So I wonder if you have any ideas about how you were able to orchestrate this through COVID?
COVID was, I said it the other night, there was a moment right when COVID was hitting where I was like, we have done at that point about 2 years of work, mostly in the kind of pre-design stages. So conversations, what could it be about? Not how are we going to do it, more what could it be about? And all of a sudden the pandemic hit, and I was like, what if we never get a physical space? Like, what if we are never in a place as a society where we will not be all together again? So I was terrified, but we kept moving forward, and at that point, I believe we were heading in out of schematic design, so kind of the big idea, into design development.
Exactly.
Where we're pulling into, okay, we have our big buckets.
We were looking at blueprints of things online.
And we were like, here's this scene, and here's how they can walk from this scene. We're in scene 2 right now for cultural expressions. And walking into scene 3, that's about the timeline. Scene 4. So now we had to really drill down. I think that the thing that helped us out, the technology allowed people to still be in a space together, and it really was about what people were thinking. So, written feedback was great, but still being able to be in that WebEx Zoom room together. There's a lot of negotiating, we were stepping on each other, but still having people in the space and being able to hear each other's voices was really key.
Although we did say more than once, you're on mute.
Yes, a lot.
For anybody out there that wants to reminisce about COVID,
Yes.
your on mute became one of the favorites.
I've got really good at facilitating online meetings through this process. So.
Yeah.
I mean, to get some incredible community feedback over that time on Zoom, that is an incredible facilitation skill. And with just the intentionality and the way that you were able to bring people together, it's really evident in this incredible space. I walked in and I'm not gonna lie to you, I was almost brought to tears, and I can only imagine, as you said, it's been an emotional process for you, but one of the first things Bob said was, make sure you look up. And then I was blown away all over again. So let's talk about what's actually here. This is one of the most interactive exhibits I've ever seen, first of all. I love museums. And you walk in here, I was like, whoa, oh my goodness, I recognize that picture, I recognize that person. I didn't even know this. And I want to participate. So what's your favorite part when you first walk in? I know that's probably a loaded question.
My favorite part when I first walk in, I think that my favorite part when I first walk in is I am overwhelmed by the color of it all. Like, we chose a really colorful palette. But by the same token, it's really colorful, but there's also a lot of like white, bright light space, and that was really to help people have that white space because we've tried to pack so much story into such a tight space. So I really love that I'm just like assaulted by the color, because to me when I'm walking around Lowell, I mean, there's flags everywhere, there's storefronts of different kinds, like that feels kind of Lowell to me. So the color and also that trying to evoke a space and a place is really what the other design that we're trying to go for here, where we're trying to kind of do a streetscape. We're trying to have sort of an outdoor space with a tree. We're trying to have it inside of a home, because we move through time and we move through space. So that was kind of the hope for some of the design pieces.
We also have a river runs through it.
Yes, so the river is always the one that I bring up as the moment where I went, what? We were well into design, and we were on a Zoom room, and I remember, and our designers were in the room as well with us, the design minds. And somebody, I don't know who was, said, well, you know what's missing from the whole exhibit? The river. And me and Bridget just like telepathically thought to each other, the river, this is an exhibit about people. My friends, the river is something we do on our boat tours. Like, right, that was where our brains were at. We were like, we tell the canal and the river story at this park, but it's like in a certain time and in a certain place. And you're
On the river.
On the river, right, yeah, we literally are on the river, and we're talking about pollution and fish and water power. What do you mean the river in the exhibit about people? And the person said, well, the river is the only reason why people have been drawn here for 12,000 years. You know, the indigenous community, the Pennacook were drawn here. This was a gathering place for them because of the falls. The mill owners were looking for a place with water power because of those falls. The river is what has pulled people here. So we were like, oh, we need the river. After we already have like 10 pounds of stuff to fit into a 5-pound bag, like what are we gonna do? But our exhibit designer, Sam, was like, let me try something. The next time she came back to us and she put the river onto the floor of the carpet. And we said, this is perfect because we already have also been talking as a group about how do we want people to experience this in terms of like flow, literal flow through the space. And so the river is great. We don't have anywhere, interpretive text about this, but it's subliminally, if you know Lowell, you know there's a river there. And it also kind of helps people flow through the space. So I love the river, but it was a moment of, we need to prioritize community members' feedback, but how are we going to do this? I don't know.
But you made it work in an amazing way. It really is like, you see the river flow, and it's just like it is in Lowell. You have all of this vibrant color and these lights and everything and all these people. The other thing that you notice when you come in is the sound. Oh my gosh, what a sensory experience.
That was, the sound. So we have some ambient audio that literally is sound captured on Kirk Street. We collaborated a little bit with the high school to get some of their ELL classes out and walking around Kirk Street. And it has somebody driving by with their music playing very loud, it has construction sounds, and it has different youth in the city talking with their teachers and talking in other languages, which I think is really neat. And another great opportunity, we got to partner with the high school for that.
Wow, so as you're walking through here, you notice so many different things, the past and the present coming together, and there's opportunity to build for the future.
Yes, that was really important, and we kept hearing that again and again, because the exhibit that had been here, it was designed up until 1984 and was opened in 1986, and literally the timeline stopped in 1984. It was up in the mezzanine, stopped. And everybody that we were talking to that knew that exhibit or just knew how the city changes day to day was like, this exhibit needs to live and breathe. So a couple ways that we've been able to do that. One are kind of these movable panels. So we call them people cards or photo cards, depending on which one it is. And we literally we have that template, we have that file, and we'll be able to produce some of those every year. So as we have new people coming into the city, as we uncover new historical anecdotes that fit in with the themes, we can produce panels that can move around the space. We also have it that people can add their own stories on whiteboard panels. So we're a little anxious about the markers in the space, but I'm very excited to see what people will write and how they will respond and how they can put themselves into the exhibit. And then of course, we have the wonder of technology. And so people will be able to use the story booth that's inside the exhibit and record their own stories. And then we'll be able to push those right into TV screens into the exhibit. So they are actually in the exhibit too.
That's so cool. And this is a very accessible exhibit. There's something for everybody here.
We tried really hard to make it accessible in every way possible. We worked with folks from the Accessibility Commission at the city too to make sure we were accessible in every possible way. But we did also think about age range, interest level. We have people coming from all parts of the country. We have littles. We have people who have been in Lowell for 100 years. So we tried to make them have something for everybody. And I think that it works because it's about everybody. It's about the people that are their neighbors or about people just in the city. So
it totally is. I can just picture the youth that I used to work with coming in here, when they go on their annual field trip to the boarding house or anything, they're always just okay, the mill girls, okay, cool. But they'll come in here and they'll see themselves.
See
that's
themselves,
so cool. See each other, see their neighbors,
Yep.
like you said.
One of the kind of overarching goals that came out very early in the process was to see yourself and to better understand others. So it's about yourself, it totally is, and what are the reflections of yourself and your experience, but also what are not your experiences and how can you understand others, because that creates empathy and that creates a better society, hopefully.
Imagine.
So tell us when the world can come into the space.
Yes, so the world can come into the space on September 23rd, 2023. We are going to have a grand ceremony in Boarding House Park where we'll unfurl a big banner and have lots of celebration, and then after that point we'll have the exhibit open, and it'll be open every day. That's the goal of the park, is have it open every day except for Thanksgiving, Christmas, and New Year's Day. We will not be open, but after that we are planning on having it open every day to folks to visit. But on September 23rd, some other special things that are going on as part of the celebration. All afternoon we'll have performances in Boarding House Park. So Anchor Dance Troupe is on the hook, Greater Lowell Indian Cultural Association, of the OBC drummers and dancers, St. Michael's Catholic Choir is going to be there. So lots of performances, and then lots of organizations are going to be there sharing what they are about and what they do to bring culture to the city of Lowell.
This is so beautiful. I think it's definitely representative of my Lowell.
That's nice to hear. That's really good to hear.
And the Lowell that, I hope that we aspire to have.
Yes.
Bob, as a historian, you're walking in here. What are your thoughts? What are your first impressions? And, I'm thinking of us not just as historians, but as storytellers. It definitely tells a story. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think about my relationship to this in some way, as well as everything inside, because Christoph Strobel and I, another person in the history department at UMass Lowell, got a consulting contract over a decade ago to write an updated history of immigration in Lowell, which you can find online, by the way. But at any rate, that was the beginning of the historical work that was being done to lay the foundation for the park, to then go get more money to do the next step and then the next step. So I feel like there's that history as well, which I don't think people necessarily realize how long, because I think we were working on that like in the late 90s, early 2000s.
I think it's a 2008 published date.
Yeah. So, I mean, we worked on it for probably 3 years. So probably in 2005, the park had the idea then that this was going to happen. And that, in order to get money appropriated, in order to then, and then it took, what people don't necessarily realize when they come in is like the amount of work that's done to build this. I mean, everything that was in here was gutted, taken away, and then people had to fabricate in other places in the country the cases and the technology and everything, then bring it in and install it and check it. And so it's been, again, this really amazing process. But what I see is, I worked maybe 3 or 4 years ago now on a big exhibit for the International Institute of Lowell. Now it's called the New England International Institute. May have been in Lowell for 100 years, settling immigrants and refugees. And a lot of what I see here is that story even more elongated. But what again is also important, I think, is what Emily mentioned at the outset. Most times you go to an immigration exhibit, there isn't anything about Black Americans. There isn't anything about Africans before the Civil War. There might be if there's Ghanaians or Kenyans or Sudanese refugee community in your city, but not about the fact that there were people here and sort of how they interacted. And the Native American history is missing. And I feel like that's what this captured. And the other thing that this does, again, as a historian and thinking about it, is just in the time we've been working on this, there have been several more new groups coming to Lowell. When you look at the thing that we wrote that you say has a publication date of 2008, it stops at a point where there's probably a half a dozen more communities that have come to Lowell just since 2008. And if this was built the way normally these things get built, it would have dead-ended now and it would have been out of date when it opened.
Yep.
But now this won't be. And so from the perspective of being able to interconnect the technology to the community, and I also think that what the park did really, really well is build trust. Because it's one thing to say you want people to tell you a story. It's another thing for people to actually be willing to come tell you a legit story. Because they don't believe that you're saying that, but you really don't want to care. But in this case, the community definitely saw what Emily was trying to do and other people in the park and felt, okay, we got to, you know, we can't not participate in this because if we don't, we're going to get left out of something beautiful. And here we are.
Here we are, and the workers are here.
And the workers are here.
And I hope that, you know, if we're looking forward in time and processes, thinking about other museum spaces that are more worker focused, can we take what we did with this process and think about that for other places in the park and other places in the city? So
Don't worry, I'm not going
I know
anywhere.
you're not going anywhere. I was gonna say. But there's a lot more people to talk to, and I think that this is hopefully a opportunity and a springboard for the park of like we did engage with this process, we built a lot of trust, and we learned a lot about how to do that, and I think that we don't want to let that go.
While Emily was doing all this work, she had 2 kids.
During the
kids.
pandemic.
And also they got to come in here the other day, and that when the community roundtable folks got to come in during installation, that made me cry. But then also seeing my babies in this space was like, oh wow, this is why we do it, right?
Yeah.
This is why we do it.
And they're going to be a part of this living history.
It's very cool.
And thank you for being an excellent steward.
Thank you.
And the whole park, of
Yes,
course.
the whole park.
It's not just
It's
Emily.
not just me,
She
please.
stresses that a lot. It's not just,
It's
but,
a big team.
and you are an amazing steward for this and an amazing advocate. And I really believe that your values shine through here in the process and how everything came through. I'm grateful that you are one of the main people working on this because I know some of those questions would not have been asked otherwise.
Well, like Bob said, you know, you take it from your history professor, but also your neighbor view. I mean, I take it from my park ranger and also my neighbor view. You know, I live in the city, I've grown up in the city, so that's really important to me too.
So I know that we're going to be wrapping up soon, but why don't you walk us through just the scenes? Give us a verbal walkthrough.
So walking in, you're walking into the city of Lowell, just inside. And so you kind of are assaulted by those sounds of the city, of people walking around, construction, music. And then it opens up really talking about our expressions and how we express culture. And those are sort of the tip of the iceberg things, right? The things we think of, dance and music and food and storytelling. So there's a lot of objects from across history that help us tell those stories. In this scene, there also are some great audio-visual pieces where we can actually see people dancing, see people making, see people talking about their stories. You can even smell maybe some things that maybe you're cooking in your own kitchen. And then we also really wanted to, again, situate people in time and place. And so context is really important. So we had a timeline that was painstaking to create, to decide what goes on a timeline. But again, I think the overarching idea of these bigger epics of time and these bigger things that are happening throughout the world and how those impact Lowell was how we kind of figured out what the timeline should show. And then also different communities throughout time, different neighborhoods almost. Now, they're not neighborhoods earlier on, but that's the idea, really, where people are living and how they're interacting with one another. And then the part of really a lot of our culture and where we express it is in our homes. And so the home scene really tries to get at what are the harder conversations around a kitchen table? What are things that your kids are asking you when they come home from school? What are the things that you have on your mantle? What are the books you read at night when you go to bed? So what is traditions is another big part of that. You know, what are your family traditions? So personal stories, and then taking those personal stories and who you are and walking out into the community, walking out maybe into the park where there might be a tree. So our big tree is probably one of my favorite visuals for the whole exhibit. But it really is about places where people gather and how communities come together. So whether that's through organizations, whether that's through sport, whether that's through religion, a lot of our objects really feature how people come together. And the other thing that we want to talk about is that when people come together, there's friction and weirdness and badness too. So how do community conflict, how do we show the conflict between communities, among communities, but how do we come out of that stronger? And that's kind of the exit of the exhibit is where do we go from here? You know, who are you as a person? You put those magnets on the wall and think about how your own personal identity is reflected. And then what do you take with you and what do you talk about? So taking one of those buttons, checking your bias, listening, talking about race, all those things we're hoping you're doing in the exhibit, bringing that out to the world as you go back into outside Lowell. So.
Wow, this is so beautiful. Thank you, Emily. Thank you to the parks. Thank you, Bob. Thank you to the over 300 people who had community input. And I hope all of you are tuning in and you come in either on Saturday, September 23rd, or the other what is it?
362.
Yeah. The other 362 days, the One City Many Cultures exhibit will be open here at the Patrick Mogan Cultural Center. This has been History in Lowell. Thanks for tuning in.